Ladies and gentlemen, apes and sapiens alike, coming at you live from the heart of the Forbidden Zone. Put your hands together for Talk of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, stop that. Stop that. You don't have to clap so much, Rose. You don't have to. It's okay. It's okay. Welcome
Why
back.
are you still here?
Why
Go home.
No, don't go home. There's still
But
two episodes left of the show.
Do you have anything else to do?
Winter, the audience, they're clapping for us. They want us to talk about Planet of the Apes.
Dude, you have school tomorrow.
No, there's no school tomorrow. We have to talk about
not for
Planet of the
you,
Apes.
for them.
For them.
Yeah.
All right, well, they're here to learn about our show. They want to be entertained. They want to hear talk of the Planet of the Apes, which is the name of this here show. I'm one of your hosts, Danny.
Help me. Please, I've been here all day. Please.
Oh, she's starting to break.
Please.
She's starting to break. She's starting to break. I'll say it again. I'm your host, Danny.
And I'm Winter.
And that's a Winter. And we are your hosts for Talk of the Planet of the Apes, the only podcast on the internet, and the only podcast on the internet that is going to be covering the first 5 Planet of the Apes movies, the original series, the original movies or whatever, the original sequels, whatever you want to call them.
Yes.
In order, movie by movie, reviewing them and then breaking them down for your listening pleasure. Isn't that right?
Because it's just talk.
It's just talk.
It's just talk of the Planet of the Apes.
Talk of the Planet of the Apes. Am I right? I'm starting to infect her. I'm trying to infect her mind. But today we are talking about Conquest of the Planet of the Apes.
1972, directed by J. Lee Thompson.
Yes. Directed by J. Lee Thompson and written again by Paul Den. It features Roddy McDowall, yet again, returning, not as Cornelius this time, but as Caesar. And it what's it called? It has a returning producer of Arthur P. Jacobs, as he is in every single one of these movies. One of the first credits that appears on the screen.
Absolutely. Sometimes more than once. Did you notice that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did notice that. Yeah, I did. Music in this one is by Tom Scott. We have a different musician coming in for this one. And you want to dive into the production history?
Yeah.
Let's get into it. So, director J. Lee Thompson, as we just mentioned, is the director of this movie, was interested in this franchise ever since the first one was being produced. Because Arthur P. Jacobs, the guy who owns the rights to this franchise, who's been getting these movies made, approached him to direct the first one.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, he couldn't. So, he was hired to do Conquest. He was hired yet again for this one. And he had worked with Jacobs on 2 films prior. They were called What a Way to Go and The Chairman, or the Chairman. And he was involved in early stages of the first film of Planet of the Apes, but scheduling conflicts made it so that he couldn't direct it or was not available to do the rest.
Got it.
So this is someone who was there since the beginning, but hasn't had their chance really until now,
right?
To actually direct one of these. So that's I don't know. That's how J. Lee Thompson got involved.
Okay.
There was a lot of attention put into what characters would be wearing and how they would look in relation to one another in this film. As you can tell, it's very obvious from the opening scene how directed, like, all the colors and the visuals are of this. And I mean, if you really couldn't tell, if you needed someone to hit you in the head with a frying pan, he had the characters dress in black turtlenecks and give this kind of severe feeling of the Nazis. Quote.
It also looked like it was color graded like Dawn of the Dead.
Kind of. Yeah. Kind of. Yeah, it kind of has this monochromatic color scheme where, like, this dystopian society is very brutalist. It's very concrete, black, white, these gray neutral tones. And the contrast between the black and the white, the concrete and the gray and all that stuff. And
the chimps, they're in orange and green, right?
Yes. So
they're very neon.
They're color coded in prison jumpsuits.
Yeah.
Similarly to how they're color coded in the future by their like uniforms, whether they're
Right.
gorilla, orangutan, or chimp.
Exactly.
They're color graded the exact same way here, but it's appropriated towards more of a prison like jumpsuit kind of outfit.
Right.
And it's an organizational thing, which kind of explains where that comes from in the future
Mm-hmm.
in the previous films.
Like these are the colors of their ancestors, when really those were the colors that they were,
That were assigned
branded
to them.
into.
Right.
Yeah.
Don Murray, the actor who plays the villain, even requested that he get his lines translated into German.
Huh.
So that he can really capture the
He
feeling
plays the
of being a
governor, right?
Nazi. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He really wanted to get in there and feel like a Nazi.
Huh.
I wanted to wear a black turtleneck. He wanted to know what his lines were in German, stuff
Field
like that.
method, yeah.
Like he wanted to really like put that in there. And I mean, I don't think he had to try very hard because it comes across in every other aspect of the film as well.
Absolutely.
Screenwriter Paul Den, returning, incorporates major references to racial conflicts in North America during the early 70s. Like we were talking about before with the civil rights movement, still in full swing at this point. And you really get to feel some of that in this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that stuff from the first movie returning here in a much more nuanced way than it hasn't been in the last couple of movies.
Mm-hmm.
Almost similar to how it was in the first movie. Almost in a much more in like a traditionally sci-fi way.
Right.
Like a big thing about sci-fi allegories is that they always are like extreme versions of what we're feeling today.
Mm-hmm.
Or putting a mirror to what we're feeling today.
Mm-hmm.
And because this is almost recognizable as our society to some extent, it hits hard in that way.
Yeah.
To see these things happen. Thompson further highlighted by shooting some scenes in a manner similar to a news broadcast. So some of these racial conflict stuff that were being written to the script were being shot how they were actually being filmed in real life on the news and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to add on that? You seem like you have an idea. Like you're pensive. No,
I'm listening.
Gotcha. The primary shooting location was Los Angeles, Century City specifically, that almost campus looking area where all the buildings look the same and all these apartments are very concrete and futuristic looking.
Yes.
It kind of gives a bleak, monochromatic, ultra modern aesthetic to it. This
right.
Brutalism, this
absolutely.
This kind of like sci-fi feeling, this like 1984 feeling.
Which is interesting to see, just like in the colors alone, what kind of message can be delivered through.
Yeah, it has it has the aesthetic of like a 70s sci-fi movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like whereas the previous ones were more 60s, veering into 70s and the funkadelic stuff in the third one.
Right.
This one has like Death Race 2050.
I would also
Death Race
argue
2000. I mean
that this one is the furthest from nature.
Yes, because it's in urban decay.
Indeed.
Right. It's concrete jungle.
Exactly.
Right. And all of these shooting locations were on location on real places to give that feeling of being outside in real society, away from nature and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
As if like metropolitan expansion had continued and stuff like that. The makers of Conquest borrowed jumpsuits from TV producer Irwin Allen from Seaview, from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Yeah. All those jumpsuits were borrowed from that production of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
That's cool.
Brown clothes and computers and cabinets for ape management were used from the first Time Tunnel and other sets and props from Allen Productions. So we're really starting to get to the point here where it's like the budget's being cut. They're having to borrow from other productions and share sets and end up selling some of the stuff that they make for this movie.
They're past the apex of production success.
Yes, and we're down to a budget of $1.7 million at this point.
Wow.
But, take what you can get. I guess they're making the movie. I think the budget does not show nearly as much as it had in some of the previous films in this one because of that on-set, on-location filming.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, of the 5 original films, Conquest, what does it say here? Oh, yes. It was the only entry filmed with the R-Flex cameras and lenses provided by Zeiss Group. This is something I actually noticed as well. And I wrote it here in my notes that I really loved the wide anamorphic lens shooting style. I wrote it down here which ones they used, and they were using Zeiss lenses filmed on RE cameras, 35 millimeters. I feel like I'm like bumbling through this production history here, but I'm excited to get to the actual storyline.
Yeah.
But we've been recording. If you listen to the 0 episode, you know that we've been recording a lot of these back to back. It's almost like an experiment on our own sanity. So I'm starting to like blend. My notes are starting to like blend together in my own head, and I'm starting to read the sentences slower. But nevertheless, we get through. Nevertheless, we
charge through it.
Originally, the film opened with the ape's execution of the governor. Did you know that?
Really?
That the opening scene of the film was going to be the execution of the governor.
Why?
And it was going to be before.
I understand. But then you'd be giving away the entire.
Right.
You'd be revealing the big moment at the very beginning. So then there's nothing else to work up to.
Yeah. And they also, yes, you're right.
That's weird.
But the difference in this version is that there was also an extended ending sequence in which Roddy McDowall as Caesar delivers a speech.
Right.
Like a more elongated speech, more than the one that he actually delivers in the movie.
Yeah.
Like there was more to it. And it I don't know. It just didn't play well. They showed it at early screenings and people just didn't react to it. They felt it was overly violent because the movie had that right at the front.
And they didn't allow to build up for it for you to, as an audience member, to feel that the governor has earned it.
Yeah.
At the same time.
I agree. And I think it almost makes for like a sense of dread while you're watching the actual uprising happen.
Right.
That isn't there in the actual cut that there is now.
Right.
But it also makes for this movie to be the only movie without like a cold open.
Mm-hmm.
It starts on the title sequence. Starts with the credits. Where all the previous movies had something leading up to the credits. This one starts on the credits. And I think
immediately, yeah.
I honestly think it's like better for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think this movie starting the way it does is so powerful.
Right.
Because we start with such a drastically different looking film with such a different vibe already from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
It definitely switches up the tone. Like you don't really have, I mean, this is also a very high pressure, stressful atmosphere. It's a bumbling city where chimps are essentially used as pets because cats and dogs, they were extinct because of a plague. Mm-hmm. So because the credits immediately, you get like a cold open with those.
Right.
It doesn't allow you time to breathe. And I feel like society wise as well, and context wise, it also serves the same purpose. You never have a moment to breathe in this kind of culture. You feel how much has changed. Yes. It's been like 20 years since the previous one. That's another thing. It starts North America, 1991. Yeah. We get a timestamp. Like establishing when this is taking place and also contradicting what Cornelius stated in the previous movie. Mm-hmm. His timeline of events was much longer than what is being depicted here. Right. We're getting something that's much more accelerated because of their arrival on Earth in the previous movie. Yeah. And Paul Dinn actually spoke about this, that he spoke about the timeline, your favorite thing. Mm-hmm. He said, the whole thing has become a very logical development in the form of a circle. I have a complete chronology of the time circle mapped out. And when I start a new script, I check every supposition I make against the chart to see if it's correct to use it. While I was out there in California, Arthur Jacobs said that he thought this would be the last. So I fitted it together so that I fitted it with the beginning of Apes 1, so that the wheel had come full circle and one could stop there quite happy, I think. He ended it with, I think. Yeah, that's a little similar to what my theory is, but my theory won't be revealed until official episode 5. So, listeners, gotta stay tuned. You have to stay tuned to the final episode in order to hear it. You have to stay tuned to the final episode to hear it. You have to. Yeah, I'm putting my foot down. You have to stay tuned. You have to listen to Winter's Theory. If you don't listen to Winter's Theory, you're doing yourself a disservice.
God damn you.
God damn.
Now, do you want to hear what some of the critics that we have touched upon in the previous films have said about this one?
Yeah. Hopefully they are still emotionally detached from this one.
So, well, hopefully that one guy came around. Yeah. But the New York Times...
of course, the more violent one, he loves it.
Yeah, well, I don't know. We haven't gotten there yet. The New York Times...
Yeah.
They were positive on the first one, but they called it stupid. They didn't like the second one, and they were very positive on the third one. Right. So this time around, say J. Lee Thompson's direction furiously propels the action in a compact chromium and glass setting, and wait till you see that last battle royale. Very positive review from the New York Times.
Wow.
Variety wrote, McDowell is extremely good as usual in Simeon character, and Thompson's staging keeps the pace very lively. Another positive review. All these people loving Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Who would have thought? Conquest of the Planet of the Apes fucking rules.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Gene Siskel gave the film 2.5 stars out of 4.
Wow.
And called it an excellent in the first half hour, but the concluding action sequence runs far too long without any original slashing, maiming, or setting on fire. So criticizing like the second half just being mindless action and being boring. Whereas the first half was more thought-provoking. Whatever, Gene Siskel. Sure. Los Angeles Times wrote that the film may be the best since the first Planet of the Apes, calling it a self-contained allegory, which man's cruelty to beasts becomes symbolic of man's inhumanity to man. It's a simple but powerful premise, thoroughly developed with a good balance between dialogue and action by Den, and splendidly directed by J. Lee Thomas.
Wow.
Thompson.
Thompson.
Yeah. Glowing review from the Los Angeles Times. I think quite an intelligent review from the Los Angeles Times. I think they got their head screwed on straight. And I have a feeling you disagree. You're being quite non-contributive to me discussing this stuff.
This was my lowest rated movie.
Clyde Jevons of the Monthly Film Bulletin wrote, "The comic book adventure is a far cry from the provocative Pierre Boulle vision so impressively realized by Franklin Schaffner's 4 films ago. And in spite of some crude allegorical pretensions, it can't really be considered seriously as more than another excuse by Appjack to get maximum wear out of expensive set of costumes."
I lied. The next one is my lowest rated.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Sorry.
You're breaking my heart that you were agreeing with the scumbag over at the Monthly Film Bulletin.
No, I would never.
The film has an approval rating of 52% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the consensus reads that Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is as angry and relevant as any of its predecessors, but budget constraints and a stale script rob this revolution of the scope it requires. I think those people are cowards and they're boring. But nonetheless, what do you think, Winter?
What do I think about
any of this production history or critical reception stuff before we dive into the plot?
I think the method stuff, as far as
the governor
trying to like come off as Nazi as possible. So it's a little much.
Yeah, probably didn't have to do that.
Just a touch.
He's like, I want to read it in German. It's like, do you speak German? Nah.
No.
Yeah, no. I feel like I would vibe with it in German.
Just for the vibes.
Cool, man.
Good for you, dude.
My first note immediately is only 90s kids would get this, just because I saw it took place in the 90s.
You know what's funny is that actor, I don't want to shit on him or anything. He just feels like the person who asked for extra homework in the classroom.
Really?
Yeah. He's like, you know what, teacher?
His performance is great.
I think we need extra homework.
Wait, ma'am, you didn't collect the assignment from last night.
That's exactly what that statement feels like.
I also wrote that I love the way this is shot with the wide anamorphic lenses, and it gives it a really cool distorted look to it.
I definitely agree.
You think so?
I definitely agree. Yeah,
you want to get into the plot?
This one, sincerely, just like it just feels different based on based on what's in frame. But yeah, let's get into the plot.
I'm interested to hear what your notes were on the plot. I
love
how you describe this stuff.
You like my notes?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Also, at some point in the opening, they must have mentioned Armando. Or no. His name, Ricardo Montalban, appeared in the credits of the opening credits, and I wrote it down.
Good.
I saw his name in the credits, so I wrote it.
So I wrote, open up on the apes being kept as prisoners by humans, but also they're kept as pets as well. So we see both sides of the same coin.
They're being used as servants.
Yes, but we also see them in their training era as well. Milo grew up and is kept as a pet, quotation marks, but really he's being guarded by Armando, the circus showman.
Right. And Armando, unbelievable. In 20 years, hasn't aged a day.
Nope.
I wrote that he has a chimp in a chain.
He aged in light years.
Oh yeah. Looks gorgeous as ever. In the 90s, still going strong. I noticed that he had Milo in a chain.
Yeah.
And at this point, it wasn't revealed that he goes by Caesar now. But immediately after he does, like, he fronts as if it's his property or whatever to some guards, we see the unchained Caesar. And I wrote, hell yeah, it's a bait and switch. Armando is still a Chad.
Nice.
And yes, Roddy McDowall has returned and he is playing Caesar. I wrote, welcome back, King.
Yeah, so basically Armando is keeping Milo. Wow, that is a mouthful.
Armando's keeping Milo. Say
under
that
wraps
5 times fast.
As the only talking ape on Earth.
Right.
And at this point, we know all the cats and dogs have died from a plague brought back by an astronaut.
Oh.
That is what was revealed.
Who would have thought that coming back in time and fucking with stuff would change things? Huh.
Fascinating. I wonder if that astronaut was a chimp.
Oh my goodness.
Who also happened to place the most intelligent ape as a plant
in a circus.
Fascinating.
But yes, the apes are evolved by this point to be doing slave labor and have serial numbers.
Yes.
But they're not evolved enough to start talking.
They also get tipped with raisins.
That's adorable. I don't know why I like that, even though that's horrible.
It's horrible that they're being treated that way, but it's sweet.
It's so nice that if you wanted to be nice to one, you can give them a little fruit. And you know what? That's great.
You know what's funny? It's a nut-like fruit.
Yeah. And then I think this is the first moment where we see cops, and I took note here that they're dressed as Gestapo. Like they're dressed exactly as Nazis.
Milo and Armando, we follow them going around posting flyers when Milo slips saying lousy human bastards.
Ooh, that's a little bit later.
Yeah.
It's a little bit later.
That's as far as the montage as I've gotten.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have here where I talked a little bit about how it's very like 1984 in its aesthetic, very Nazi-like. It's very like fascist in its imagery, totalitarian. Armando, it
also seems overpopulated. Like it's really crowded.
Yes, everyone's kind of on top of each other.
Yeah.
And especially with all the apartment complexes, you assume everyone's like living stacked up.
Yeah.
And everyone's on the streets. And we revisit the story Cornelius told in the last movie, but Armando explains it. And he explains the stories about the cats and dogs dying.
Yes.
But we establish that this was from the spaceship in the previous film, just like you said. Like we hear the same story from a new perspective, showing us what has really changed.
Yes.
Which is interesting. And outside a building where there's a statue to cats and dogs, because they're a man's best friend. Because you ask a man to kill his dog and he hesitates. We ask a man to kill his fellow man. He doesn't bat an eye.
Right.
We see that men are now striking, like workers are striking because businesses are supplanting them with slave labor. Like they're hiring ape slaves to do the jobs that people were doing, and it's driving people into unemployment. It's a part of the movie that we only see a little bit in this moment, but it's very evocative.
And on top of that, like being evocative, that touching on thematically of being replaced.
Yes.
Losing your job.
Losing your job to like this acceleration of like capitalism and fascism at the same time. where it's like, well, we can just replace you with the slaves that our government is letting us use.
Right.
Like, because of this unrestrained acceleration, it's caused this like dystopian future where people are losing all their jobs and they're turning against each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, instead of understanding that like the slave labor is wrong to begin with, the protesters are protesting with signs that say slaves are scabs.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like the slaves are the bad guys, not the businesses for firing them.
Right.
Which is like the tactics that these governments use.
And also on top of that, like as we're walking around with Armando and Milo, you see people snapping at their slaves.
Yes.
At their personal ape. And it almost feels like everyone's walking on eggshells. Like something's about to snap.
Everyone's on edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so uncomfortable. Everyone's on top of each other.
Yeah.
It's not a world that is like dressed up to be ideal and like nice.
Do we know why Armando is there? Why did he take Caesar with him?
He's posting.
Oh, because they're doing a show there.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're posting flyers.
Also, Armando's character, I think, is very clever that they made him a traveling circus, because that can put him in any circumstance, regardless of budget.
And it can also be the reason why Caesar hasn't seen American society for his whole life.
That's why he's displaced.
Right. And that's why he's horrified by what he sees.
Yeah.
And I wrote here that the slaves are scabs protest, it really goes to show how like these upper class people are pitting workers against one another and breeding and causing the racism.
Yeah.
Like I can see what they meant by Paul Dehn saying that he wanted to include these things from the headlines, these things from the civil rights movement, because it's so prescient here that like, yes, these human workers are losing their jobs, but because of the propaganda of the government and the richer people, they're thinking, oh, it's the apes that are the bad guys.
Right.
That because they're taking our jobs. It's not, oh, maybe the government is not paying us properly and they'd rather fire us and abuse these apes rather than, like
have to worry about employees with human rights.
Exactly. And that, I think just that image there, it started to remind me of like, oh yeah, these movies had really a lot to say at the beginning. And this movie is like bringing that back in such like a strong way.
It's like a punch in the face.
It has a very like, I don't know. It has such like an Orwellian aesthetic to it. Like it's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I was really thrown off guard by how different this was and how much I liked it. How much I liked the vibe and like eeriness of it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yes, this is exactly the part you were just talking about where the cops start beating an ape for like stepping out of line.
Yeah.
Like brutally beating the ape. And Caesar says,
lousy human bastards.
Lousy human bastards. And the cops are like, ooh.
Who would say such a thing?
Oh my goodness. Where did that come from?
Who would say human bastards?
Right. And they're looking around and they're trying to figure out. They're like, I think that ape said it. I think that one right there said it. And Armando's like, no, this guy, he don't talk. He's my monkey.
Mm-hmm.
He's my bud. And it's like, nah. I'm starting to think that ape just talked.
Mm-hmm.
And Armando's like, no. That can't be. Listen, it was me. I'm the one who said it. And they're like, yeah. So can you tell me what it was that you said? He's like, I just said lousy bastards because you guys are being bastards.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, no, one thing I can't wrap my head around is that you said human bastards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why would you say that if you were a human?
And he's like, no, I said lousy inhuman bastards.
Yeah. And I don't know, this scene is really tense. Like I feel like this movie, at least thus far, is like taking the ape stuff a lot more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot less of like a silliness to this sci-fi aspect of it, and a lot more of like almost like a horror aspect to it. Like it's very thrilling. It's almost like that show The Boys.
It almost feels like we just went from the Roaring '20s to the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Like it was a bait and switch.
Like it's like a
total.
It's scary.
Yeah. It is scary how hardcore the pendulum swung.
Yeah, and how powerless the individuals are in this. Like how powerless they are to fight this corruption and stuff like that. It's spooky. And because this is shot like on location in real places outside, the cinematography has such like a cold and dark look to it.
Also, in that same note, due to Milo saying those things out loud, Armando ends up getting taken into custody because he's a suspect for housing the talking baby of the dead alien apes.
Well, before that.
And before he's taken in, Armando reveals to Milo that he'd be safer with his own kind.
Yes. So, well, he says, well, they run away and they go through all this like really interesting looking architecture.
Yes.
Which is like peak 70s sci-fi. I love how we're just like this cool architecture. We're going to walk right by. It's so cool. The design is so cool, I thought.
Yeah.
Especially because it's real and it's outside and it's concrete. It has a production value to it that even though this is the lowest budget film so far, it looks like the nicest quality.
Right.
Right? Like the sets, because they're not sets, they're real. They're real buildings and stuff like that. And he takes Caesar aside and he's like, listen, bud, we fucked up back there. We fucked up, man. I have to go talk to the cops because we're in trouble right now. And I can go talk to the cops. I'm so charismatic and charming that if I go back and talk to them, I'll get us off clean. But if I'm not back here tonight when the sun goes down, go to the port and hide amongst the apes and I'll find you.
Yes.
Stay right here in the stairwell. But if I'm not back, go to the port and hide amongst your own kind. Because you might be safer with them than you are on the run.
Right.
And yes, like you said, the cops immediately are like, yes, you're coming with us, you son of a bitch. You son. And I really love the way this stuff is shot because it has it's using sunlight. It's using like dark lighting and contrast in a way that all the other films took place during the daytime.
Yeah.
And this film has like this like chiaroscuro aspect to it. Like this very like contrasty, deep shadow look to it. It's even in the makeup.
Yeah.
Like Caesar's design is much more primitive. Yeah. He has much more ape-like characteristics on his forehead and stuff like that than Cornelius did.
Right.
Yeah. What do you look like you have an idea?
Oh, I was just thinking about evolutionized wise. How genetically, what kind of modifications were required for Milo to form because of his atmosphere. Like the different infrastructure of his face and what is he using the most often in this high stress, high impact world where he never gets a moment to breathe. Right. And I keep coming back to like, you know, those cold open credits. It really makes you feel that high intensity atmosphere as an audience member. Like you don't get a chance to breathe because these characters don't either. Right. So you're in for the ride. You're buckling in and you're ready to go.
Yeah. And I personally, I love like this style of cinematography. I love anamorphic lenses. I love like this contrasty lighting and like using your sets and your environment to make more interesting images. Yeah. Using shadows dynamically in a way that like you're not afraid to leave things in the dark where you can't fully see them. And like the parts that are in the light become that much more bold.
There's risk there.
Right.
Playing with shadows.
Yeah. It's something that really came to rise. Like, I mean, this movie is not The Godfather, but like The Godfather pretty famously is like, it's shot by Vittorio Storaro, which is like his whole thing is like deep contrast in dark shadows and stuff like that. And to see that brought into like an apes movie that takes itself this seriously and has this like dark of a tone. Absolutely. Was such an interesting change of pace that I fully welcomed. I was consuming it in full force. I was like, feed it to me, shove it in my mouth, shove it down my throat, choke me with it. Oh my
God. But yeah, so then Armando is in custody now.
Right. And he's being interrogated.
Now we are brought back to yet again another guardian of Milo is under interrogation because of him.
Well, he's Caesar now. He goes by Caesar Winter.
Caesar. Okay. So I just think it's fascinating that Cornelius and oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on her name. Why did
Zira?
Azira. I was gonna say I wanted to say Nova, but I was like, no, that's not right.
Nova's
Zira.
A woman. Yeah.
So Zira and Cornelius, they were forced under interrogation for information regarding their planet and the year that the Earth melted, essentially. And the humans will do anything within their power to basically avoid that and change history, change the course of history. But in that same light, she's also under great pressure because everyone's after her baby.
Right.
Which is Caesar.
Yeah.
So now he's in another situation where he has to go into hiding, and his guardian, Armando,
has to protect his baby.
Which he essentially adopted, again, because of Caesar.
Wait, so Caesar... Armando was daddy?
Yeah, basically.
Armando was daddy.
So, long story short, essentially...
you don't want to say Armando was daddy.
Essentially, long story short, Caesar is constantly being put in this predicament where anyone who cares for him is in danger.
Yes. And he's constantly, I mean, he's only heard about what happened to his parents.
Yes.
So he doesn't know firsthand. And that's something that features in the next movie as well.
Right.
But yeah, so we get to see, and I wrote here that so Caesar is forced to hide out in the cargo bay because Armando doesn't return.
Uh-huh.
And he has to take off all his clothes and be naked amongst the other apes. Meanwhile, Armando is arrested by the governor. Like he's put formally under arrest. And we cut to Armando being interrogated using the flyer that he was putting up on the walls that has Caesar on it. And they're pointing at the drawing of Caesar and they're pulling up a photo of Cornelius. And they're like, looks similar, don't it?
It's like compare a chimp to a chimp.
Yeah, a drawing of a chimp to a photo of a chimp.
Oh my god!
I thought this was hilarious because Armando was like, "No, what are you talking about?"
There's a level of dark humor there. Definitely.
I think it's a twisted sense of humor because these interrogators, these fascist like cops or whatever, are going to get what they need from him.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's through ways that make sense, through ways that are justified or not.
Right.
They're going to get what they want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if it means pointing at a drawing of an ape and going, hey, that looks like the other guy, doesn't it? Then they're going to do it. You know what I mean? And obviously Armando is just like, it's funny. It's almost like a comedy of errors. It's not shot in a funny way, but Armando is very clearly reacting like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, are you fucking insane? Which I think is amazing. But we cut back to see that Caesar is now being inducted into this concentration camp.
Which of all cages that he chooses to, or that he ends up in, he's in the cage with a bunch of orangutans. So he's the only chimp.
Yes. When he goes into the cargo port, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. He's the only chimp in a cage of orangutans.
So then now we are shot for shot seeing the full process of these chimps getting indoctrinated, and it's essentially being like the immigration system.
Yeah, it's like they're being forced to learn how to be servants.
Yeah, they get checked in, they get fingerprinted, like all this stuff.
Yeah, and we see it's almost like Caesar takes a tour.
Yeah.
As like a guard walks him through all of the different things that all the other apes are going through, which is interesting because all of those different things that they're all going through end up tying into stuff that happens later in the movie. Like we revisit all of those torture things and all of those like devices as Caesar goes throughout the film.
Right.
Which is cool. It's a cool way to do it, but it is funny how it's just like he's being walked from room to room to see what everybody's up to.
Yeah, so essentially it's revealed that the apes, they're being suspect to these overwhelming behavioral inhuman tests.
Yes.
That keep them obedient, but also that keeps them stressed out.
And it's like
including electroshock therapy.
Right. And like being shot with flamethrowers and being like tortured with electroshock therapy to get responses that maybe they would have otherwise not got.
Right.
And one in particular, we see a gorilla in the electroshock therapy where I think it has little electrodes on his head trying to read what his thoughts would be.
Yeah.
And he's saying, no, 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 no. Like the machine is saying no. And maybe that's Aldo, the gorilla, saying no.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe that's the origin of that myth.
Right.
But who knows? That's the only thing I can think of. That could be that story
that Cornelius says in the previous movie. But while Caesar is there, we see that he's like passing these tests and he's doing well at them. So he's selected for the breeding program because of his good performance in the tests.
Before that happened.
You're talking about sharing the banana?
Milo is put into a cage with 3 other chimps and shares the banana.
Yeah.
And this is done kind of under wraps, not in front of the guards.
Right.
But that's the beginning of his alliances.
Right.
He's going to start to rally people and make these alliances that's going to make him even stronger, because he has the intellect to do that, to know that strength in numbers. So essentially, I put a star next to chimp concentration camps.
Oh, God.
Basically, they're just constantly being tested and trained into carrying out basic tasks, so they can then be sold and auctioned off
as slaves. Yeah.
And
being given serial numbers.
One thing that like felt like a knife in the chest was Caesar passes baby chimps in cages separated from their mothers.
Yep.
And the look on his face, I'm like, oh my God, wow.
Yeah.
Because he's like, he was there. He was that baby that was separated from his mother.
It's like we're seeing the birth of like a revolutionary. We're seeing him realize the injustices.
Break the chain. He's going to break the system. And then now that brings me to where you're at, where Milo is considered a superior male and is paired to mate with a female who I'm guessing is Lisa?
I thought it might be, but
or is it just
I think it's just another female ape.
Because then that means he possibly has another baby out there besides his son in the fifth
besides
movie.
Cornelius.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe he does.
Huh?
But I mean, it would make sense that he would need to reproduce several times to get that intelligent ape line to continue.
Mm-hmm.
But I wrote here that scene is kind of funny
where
because she's laying there seductively like Princess Leia,
just all invocative.
Yes,
being like, "Come here, pretty boy."
And she blinks and she
bats her eyelashes,
just making a face at him.
Yeah,
that scene is great.
And he's like, "Oh, all right."
He's like, "Okay, time to fuck." He's like, monkey see, monkey do, which is actually like the way they're trained.
Thing. Yeah.
So the way I mean. That part is a little corny, but it's never like fully said.
Yeah.
But when they are trying to train these apes, they go see and they do the action.
Yeah.
And then they push the ape and they go do.
Yeah.
So it's like monkey see, monkey do, like do as I'm showing you.
Right.
Which is kind of funny. It's like a little Easter egg, but I like it. And I think the immediate next scene is they test him out at an auction.
Yeah.
They
and
test
then
out
he
Caesar.
is sold to the governor for $1,500.
Right. And the governor is even referred to in this as His Excellency.
Right.
As if like, reminder, this is a Nazi. Like this guy's a Nazi.
Yeah.
And when he's brought in with the governor, he's brought into his office and they're testing him out and they're having him pour tea or whatever.
Yeah.
And
or they're having him pour alcohol.
Right. They're having him pour
make a cocktail or something.
And
James Bond.
He fucks it up on purpose.
Yeah, he does.
And they're like, maybe he's not that smart. Maybe
he was like, he won't be a bartender, but and then they end up bringing him somewhere else.
Yeah, so he won't be a bartender, and then McDonald, the governor's one of the governor's staff members, who happens to be a black man, very much like on purpose.
Yeah,
him being a black man is very relevant. He's going to become
a very pivotal character for the rest of this film and the next one.
His brother's in the next film.
What?
Yeah, so we'll talk about that next episode. But yes, he's an extremely pivotal character. And it's very important that he is a black man because they directly relate the struggles of the civil rights movement to what is happening right now, like explicitly in the dialogue. Right. And he says, after they make fun of him for being dumb and not being a good bartender, he says, quote, "Brightness was never quite encouraged among slaves." And the governor says, "Don't be so touchy, Mr. McDonald. All of us were slaves once." And then we get a reaction shot from McDonald and he says, "In one way or another," as if it's like that Get Out style of racism.
Yeah.
Where it's like, "Hey, I'm going to be racist to you, but like, because, I get it, like it's that pitter patter of like this, there's clearly still racism and this injustices amongst humans happening.
Right.
And even though they're taking it out on the apes, they're still carrying these evils in them, this resentment, to the point where like the governor literally tells a black man, "We were all slaves once."
These generational grudges,
right?
Like that heartache that's just passed down.
And it's so like you see it on McDonald's face, like the stuff that he had probably had to live through, and that he has to deal with working for this guy, and how it's like it's it's still, even to this day, there's still injustices like that stuff.
Right.
But I think that's a very important scene. And I wrote that like the black men being the only sympathetic and self-aware ones in the system run by fascists and Nazis in a film released at the tail end of the civil rights movement. It's like so obvious. Like it's so, and not in a way that's like obvious in a goofy way. Like it's in there in a way where it's like, it's important that it's in there.
Right.
It's not like like in the previous, like in the second film, when they're just doing like Vietnam protests in the movie or Nixon impressions, which I think are great, but like those are more like overt satire, whereas this is like allegory. You know what I mean?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But then Armando, we're back.
One of your favorite scenes happens.
What? Which one?
They don't know what to name this.
Oh, Caesar chooses his name. So,
they're sitting there in the room, and right before they
I thought it was a Bible, but Dan says an encyclopedia.
Yeah, it seems like he has like the Encyclopedia Britannica on the shelf, and he pulls one book off and he sets it down. He says, "Let's do it like we used to let our sons pick their names and have the monkey pick his own name."
Yeah.
And Caesar flips through and he finds the page that has his name on it and he points at it, Caesar. And the governor looks over and he's like, "Caesar, a king's name? Okay. Whatever, Caesar." Like, he's like, "Fuck you, idiot."
He like dismisses him.
Yeah, but he lets him have the name.
Yeah.
And as Caesar is marching downstairs to where he's going to be working, we fully see a cameraman in shot. We fully see it.
Really?
Yeah. I have it written right here.
Oh my God,
a set photographer fully gets in shot as Caesar is going down the stairs.
Oh my God, I didn't notice.
It's so funny. It's like
I have to watch it back now.
What is it in The Mandalorian or something in the background? There's a guy in jeans standing. This is the exact thing.
Oh my God.
Which is funny considering the downstairs of that office building looks like the Death Star.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now that you say that totally makes sense.
Like, obviously this is before Star Wars, but it's so funny.
Yeah. So then now are we with Armando?
I wrote here, the Death Star is in the basement of this office. And then I just wrote a little bit of a note here right before the Armando scene, because this is that 1970s pre-Star Wars science fiction aesthetic of like these bland walls and like the inclusions of like almost this mythical level of technology, like the authenticator device in the interrogation.
Yeah.
How like it's mostly normal, weird architecture, weird costumes, and also this computer that can read your mind. Like, you know what I mean?
Just casually.
Yeah, that's like that level of like 70s sci-fi that I love.
Well, speaking of computers that can read your mind, Armando is subject to the authenticator,
right?
Which is a weapon that forces people to tell the truth. So it's like a parallel to truth serum.
Right.
Or grape juice plus syringe. Like, because that's the way that they compared it to, is they're like, oh, it's just a sedative. It'll make it feel the same way grape juice plus does.
Right.
So yeah, basically Armando is subject to this inhumane
authenticator device.
Right? Yeah, that's used in interrogations. And in my opinion, this is what appears to look like the beginning of mutant human technology.
Yeah, I guess because psychological.
Like, psychological warfare.
That's fair, yeah. And they're doing it in a way where they're like, well, I mean, there should be nothing wrong with this. This is humane.
Yeah.
Like they're acting very smug about it.
Like using technology and blending that boundary between technology and getting into people's heads.
Yes.
That on wavelength kind of basis.
That's like a good point. Like I didn't even register that. That's like a very good point. You get that, like that might be the birth of that level of like, I don't know, like,
psychological or like telekinetic powers.
And then once they became radioactive, maybe if there's enough devices within the society, they started to meld with the machines.
Maybe.
Like there was some sort of technological advance that caused all of these machines to send out a signal, which then was also released at the same time as the radioactive blast.
And it probably had to do with like they're irradiated and they're having to live silently underground.
Mm-hmm.
So they would evolve to develop these powers.
Yes.
Like they would mutate into that,
mm-hmm.
which is why they're called mutants,
because
I suppose.
This already exists, but it doesn't exist within the human mind yet.
Right. So maybe because they already are aware of this technology, that the lack of that technology allowed them to mutate or evolve into a state
right
where they could become that technology.
Like a chosen mutation.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, like natural selection.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah.
And at the end of the scene, Armando tries to protest this interrogation and he fucking kills himself.
He jumps out a window.
Well, not on purpose.
Well, he fights a guard.
He fights a guard, and while trying to get away from the guard,
yeah,
he jumps out the window.
Yeah.
And just fucking dies.
And Caesar finds out about it.
Yes.
And this is essentially what destroys him and fuels his vengeance.
He knows that he doesn't have a home to go back to.
Yeah. Like the only person who knew of him as a person is gone.
Yeah. And
everything that he used to have is just gone.
The scene where Caesar finds out about it
mm-hmm.
is incredible.
Because he's just like, he's screaming with his mouth closed and like tears gushing from his face. It's like, oh my God.
I wrote that like the low light cinematography here and Roddy McDowall's performance crying and wailing in sorrow at Armando's death is
mm-hmm.
like incredible. Like, I don't think a moment in any of these movies are nearly as good as like this performance here.
As far as being the most emotionally draining.
Yeah.
I would say that the baby getting executed left me emotionally drained. But
the performance,
that was the end of the film.
Right.
We are in the beginning of his character development as a leader for Caesar.
We're like halfway in the film, yeah.
But we're in the beginning of his revolution.
Right.
This is going to fuel his fire. This is the turning point. This is approaching the innermost cave.
Yeah.
So, because of that, and how long it goes on for a solid couple minutes.
Well, this is the moment that breaks him.
Yeah.
This is the moment where like the immediate next scene is him appearing before other apes that are doing like their servant duties.
And begins to influence them.
And they're beginning to rebel.
Mm-hmm.
Just at the sight of him. It's very like
it's coming to a simmer.
He's becoming quite literally like an idol, like a figurehead. Like he is the representation of the revolution.
Right.
He just his anger and his sorrow in his eyes, looking at them and making eye contact, is causing them to drop their books. Like Lisa, she drops the books, or like the gorilla that tosses over the bins,
mm-hmm.
or the chimp working in the restaurant, like looking back and thinking like, oh, what would Caesar do?
Yeah. Seeing
Caesar and remembering like, I could take this. I have the opportunity. I have the agency to steal this knife and to do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout this sequence, we see that they're gathering it in like a hideaway.
Yeah.
They're in like a cellar, like a bricked out cellar.
Mm-hmm.
And they're bringing knives and they're bringing books and they're bringing things that like shopping lists for their masters.
Yeah.
That allow Caesar to add things to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, kerosene, heavy artillery, add that to the grocery list. All right. We need lettuce, iceberg lettuce. We need a gallon of milk, 50 caliber bullets, and 14 gallons of kerosene. Like it's
totally casual.
I don't know. What is it? Like, why does that work? But Caesar is using the apes fucking up their chores.
Yeah.
And the perceived lack of intelligence as a way to cause civil disobedience
mm-hmm.
and unrest to human society.
Right.
Like we hear through the grapevine, through the governor, that there's like an upturn in apes messing up their chores.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not hearing that like there's a weird amount of purchases of guns and kerosene. Like we're not hearing that.
Yeah.
Because Caesar is hiding this activity under the guise of incompetence.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Which I think is cool.
Yeah.
I think that it's very point in using the civil disobedience philosophy that was like Martin Luther King's whole thing, like the philosophy of civil disobedience, in order to cause this uprising in the background, I think is super cool.
And he's also using the expectations of the humans against them.
Yeah.
In order to blanket what he is actually doing. He's allowing things to unfold and to simmer and to build up. And he's continuing to have these meetings, which are very like underground. Yeah, exactly. Like they're very isolated from the typical eye, the guard's eye.
And it's letting the humans come to their own wrong conclusions.
Yeah.
Which I think is cool.
Absolutely.
I think it's super intelligent.
He's like, I'll let you believe that.
Yeah. And it's a level of like intelligence and like and visual storytelling that you don't expect to find in like a low budget sci-fi movie from the 70s.
But then it is revealed that Caesar is being beckoned.
Yes. Because they find out that Caesar shouldn't have been in that delivery with the orangutans.
Indeed.
Because that came from Indonesia.
So
and Indonesia don't got no chimps.
Nuh-uh, only orangutans.
Where'd that chimp come from?
So, with that being said,
they find out that he's the intelligent ape.
Mr. McDonald now is with Caesar and begins to have this alliance with Caesar because Caesar reveals to him that he could speak and he is the talking ape.
And I feel like Mr. McDonald knew that.
Yes.
And that's why he started to become kind of an ally to him
and
cover for him. And he lets him go under the guise of saying, yeah, I'm bringing him right to you. So the governor doesn't suspect a thing, but he's visually letting Caesar know that like, hey, I see what you're doing.
Right.
I'm going to give you a chance to get away. And this is done, and this exchange is done in a hallway that looks very...
Almost looks like the inside of a spaceship.
Yeah. It's like round hallways with the lights on the walls, like Star Wars, with like these Nazis in leather and black trench coats walking down the hallway. Like it has a very Star Wars look
Which
to
the
it.
Nazis are very tall, but the hallways are very narrow and short. Right. So it makes them look powerful, but crowded.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go.
It has a very like imperial officer look to it, like those Star Wars movies have. And eventually they do catch Caesar as he's running over the bridge.
Yeah, he attempts to escape, but he's caught by the guards who place him into custody.
I will say the shots of him running in the dark look cool as fuck.
Oh, absolutely. And the Nazis came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Too. That was
and they corner him. It's spooky.
Yeah. But they also strap him into the electroshock device, and he is tortured into speaking.
Right. And he doesn't say no, like the legend said, and he's not Aldo.
He says, have pity.
Have pity.
Yes.
Oh my. And they don't. They say, shock that bitch till he dies.
And Mr. McDonald, he steps away, and the governor assumes that he's just a weakling. Like he can't handle watching it.
At the pain.
But Mr. McDonald actually goes and cuts the power to the shock table.
Okay, so I wrote this down. So he goes downstairs.
Yeah.
He cuts the power only to the shock table.
Uh-huh.
And Caesar picks up on this. So he plays dead.
Yeah.
The guy operating the shock table never notices that the shock table turned off.
Yeah.
They never check to see if Caesar died.
They just kind of...
They're just like, yeah, he's dead. And he leaves.
And that was it.
And then they leave. And when McDonald teams up with them, he has this alibi of like, hey, I couldn't bear to watch that.
Yeah.
And they believe him because it makes sense or whatever, you know? And
because they expect him to be weak because they don't see him as an equal too.
Exactly. Because the racism never goes away.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you have this enemy that you view as even more evil because they're not your species anymore. The prejudice in humankind remains.
So now, after faking his own death, he returns to his troop of apes.
Well, he kills that guard, right?
Which one?
The guard who was left behind.
Are you sure?
He fakes his death, and the guard who's left behind unhooks him, and Caesar's like, fuck you, when he kills him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he does.
And then, he returns to his apes because now is the time.
because now is the time. They're all ready to go.
Yeah.
They're ready. And then they set a man on fire?
Hell yeah. I wrote so the uprising starts in that room.
Yeah.
And that room where all the training things
Which
are.
also, this was a combination of long shots, right?
Yes, it's all shot is like so incredibly. I wrote there's so much chaos, has large rabble rouser energy, right? Lots of extras and stuntmen that are just actually tackling each other and shooting fire willy-nilly from a flamethrower. That's all good stuff.
And the rumor spreads that ape management are under the power of the apes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what was being spread around.
And yeah, because Caesar gets on the mic and he's like on the intercoms, and he's like, "Watch out! I'm coming for your ass. Give me the governor. Give me the governor."
Caesar is also officially established as a threat to the human race.
Yes, and a gorilla flamethrowers a man. All right, and in a fire stunt that's actually incredible.
Yeah.
He does a firewalk that goes for like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's all on camera. It's so
is.
cool.
It's so
incredible.
Good. Also, like, I mean, that maybe I'm just looking a little too deep into it, but now they used to wear jumpsuits that are orange, but they set the man on fire and now he's orange. So in a way, they're like, they're taking back their power.
The gorillas are still wearing orange, right? And the orangutans were yellow and the chimps were green. Mm-hmm. And I know this is when the movie becomes a battle movie. Like there's like an uprising, there's like a revolution, there's a lot of violence. This is where the movie gets its reputation of being very violent, because there's like full on imagery of like riot cops firing on protesters. There's like imagery that is pretty intense, like close-ups of headshots that are done by like splashing paint on actors' faces. Yeah, which it's effective, man, because it caught me by surprise. I didn't expect to have close-ups of headshots in this movie.
No,
especially after like the previous movies have some pretty intense stuff.
Yeah,
but there was never like blood or any of that stuff.
Right.
But this movie has like straight up guys getting shot in the front of the face, and apes getting shot in the face, and like getting really fucking shot with shotguns and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a way that makes for like a very intense action sequence. As one of the reviews we read earlier points it out, like you have to see the battle royale. Like it goes nuts.
Yeah. It goes hard.
The filmic language is like very dark, in a like visually dark, like literal mostly shadows.
But also it shows that it forces you to pay attention a little bit more. You're locked in.
It also
and you're working under the cover of night.
It hides the cheaper costumes.
Yes.
So like the cheaper ape masks don't look cheap in this movie at all compared to like Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Right.
Where they looked pretty cheap in the wide shots. Yeah. In this, it might as well just be as good as the first one in that category, because it's filmed in a way that doesn't allow you to notice that they're cheap and notice that they're masks. It also conveys the intensity of the violence that are committed by riot police and stuff like that you see in these types of things in real life. You know?
And then the ape mob,
yes,
douses ape management in gasoline as they proceed to go beat the firing squad.
Yes,
and move as like one organism, like one entity.
They move as a crowd, almost like Spartans.
Yeah, exactly. And it's terrifying because they're just like there's nothing that they cannot get around. There is at one point where they're face to face with a SWAT team, and you start to believe that maybe this is the end. This is the downfall of the revolution. There's
a standoff that is like very tense, and they're just they're just opening fire and like throwing Molotovs, and like you see that the apes are showing up, and you think like, oh, maybe they're done because these guys all have guns. But then you see that they planned for that, and that they have a gorilla on standby who's like throwing a Molotov cocktail.
And they have
reinforcements coming from behind.
They just have reinforcements coming from everywhere.
They're just being overwhelmed.
Everywhere.
It's like an incredible.
And the humans, they say they're armed and organized.
Right.
And I love how you also see that the actors are just like firing the guns randomly.
Yeah.
Like, they're just being like, just shoot shit. And I think it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah.
There's a clash between the apes and men that has like sword and shield sound effects. As if it's like a swords and sandals battle, like gladiators. Because when they actually go to the riot cops shields make the sound effects of like clinks and clanks, like knights.
What really gets me is when they are conquering, setting things on fire, but at the same time they're piling the bodies.
Yes, well, that's right at the end.
Yeah,
but like up until that point, like it's almost harkening back to like the medieval style of the first film because of this medieval style.
It comes back to that, like that primitive,
right? And they eventually get to where the governor's hid out downstairs in the Death Star basement. And they get to the door and they got a welder because
they got a freaking power tool.
Yes, well, they got it earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
And he learns how to use it.
There's an ape using a power tool.
Yeah. So Caesar shows up and he uses a welder and he opens the door like he's Qui-Gon Jinn in the Phantom Menace.
It's hysterical to see the governor's reaction.
He's like, where did they get that? Like he's like dumbfounded. It's the best. But yeah, Qui-Gon Jinn's the door open and gets to the separatists or whatever. And they overpower all the men in there and they get the governor on his knees. And they ask him, they're like, hey, before we fucking kill you, why did you treat us like this? Like, why you caused this? Do you care to like tell us anything? Do you have any insight on why you were so cruel? And the governor gives this speech about like starting off about how he hates ape kind and then kind of transitioning into like, you guys represents the part of ourselves that we hate.
Well, actually, before that too, I wrote down "The king is dead, long live the king."
Yes.
And another quote I wrote down:
"Every Caesar must have their Brutus.
The beast must be whipped into submission."
Yes.
That's the dark side of humanity.
Yeah. And the governor realizes this in his last moments.
Yes.
He's like, in reality, the very thing we were afraid of, the very thing we hated was the parts of ourselves that you guys represented.
Right.
Which is not fair at all for them to be treated that way. But it's fascinating to see.
Because you're the problem, not them.
Right. And how so much of this could have been avoided if they didn't approach it that way. If they didn't, you know what I mean? Like if they didn't view it as they're the problem, let's take our problems out on them.
So after the governor reveals this, the apes continue to beat the bodies of the humans into also, like a puree.
In that speech, he name drops the planet of the apes.
Yeah.
He's like, a planet of apes or whatever, which is great. But yes, we see the apes. They're playing with the blood and the bodies of the dead.
Mr. McDonald just looks up at Caesar and he says, as a descendant of slaves, I beg you to stop.
I am asking you to show humanity.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're being violent in a way that is no different than their oppressors.
Yeah. And
when we see Caesar's face, he likes it. He's smiling. His eyes are wide with excitement.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, he's created a monster.
Yeah.
Like he's no better than the people that were there before. And I, as a descendant of slaves, am asking you to show humanity. And then Caesar kind of snaps at him. He's like, I'm not a human. Humanity, like what the fuck? No.
And I was brought back to in his he gives a speech, basically establishing that there is no other world besides the one where there is no place for humans.
Yes.
And there's undertones of not only Hitler but Paul Atreides.
Yep, I wrote that right there. Yes. So I wrote down the whole exchange because I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
But so McDonald says violence prolongs hate. Hate prolongs violence. By what right are you spilling their blood?
Yeah.
And Caesar is like, it's by the slave's right to punish his persecutor. And then McDonald says, I, a descendant of slaves, am asking you to show humanity. But I was not born human. This is what Caesar says. I know, a child of evolved apes whose children shall inherit the earth. For better or for worse, do you think it could be worse? Do you think this riot will win freedom for all your people by tomorrow? By tomorrow, it'll be too late. Why a tiny, mindless insect like the emperor moth can communicate with over a distance of over 80 miles. Mm-hmm. So he's like, listen, my revolution might be over by tonight, but what I've started is going to spread. Right. Like, 80 miles away, these revolutions will happen just the same.
Once this has started, there is no stopping it. There is no going back.
An emperor ape might do slightly better. Mm-hmm. Like, he's accusing and calling him an emperor. Like, he's bringing that, like, Paul Atreides Hitler shit. He's like, oh, so you're going to be the same. Yeah. You're going to be your own great leader or whatever, your excellency. And then Caesar's like, slightly. What you have seen here today, apes on the 5 continents will be imitating tomorrow. With knives against guns, with kerosene cans against flamethrowers. And then Caesar has a speech. Mm-hmm. You want to read the speech with me? Sure. Where there is fire, there is smoke. And in that smoke from this day forward, my people will crouch and conspire and plot and plan for the inevitable day of man's downfall. The day where he finally and self-destructively turns his weapons against his own kind. The day writing in the sky when your cities lie buried under radioactive rubble. When the sea is a dead sea and the land is a wasteland out of which I will lead my people from their captivity. And we will build our own cities in which there will be no place for humans except to serve our ends. And we shall found our own armies, our own religion, our own dynasty. And that day is upon you. Now. Cut to black. End of movie. Roll credits. Roll credits.
Well, don't roll credits yet, because the riot still has to completely pulverize the governor.
Yes, they execute the governor. They execute the fuck out of him. They execute
and they play with his guts.
Yeah, man, this movie is kind of intense. Kinda.
So I basically wrote as my summary: spawn of Cornelius and Zira, Milo to Caesar, runs from the law. Canceling his power of speech.
Concealing.
Concealing.
It's your own handwriting. You can't read your own handwriting.
Listen, we've been here since before noon. Okay. give me a break.
Okay.
Concealing his power of speech. Not until he loses his guardian Armando does he crave vengeance and human blood, laying the law for the future of simian kind in the dawn of earth belonging to the apes. The moral being violence breeds violence. Slave and master is not the solution, regardless of who's in power, human or ape. And cinematic takeaway. Mm-hmm. Lots of fire, no water.
No water.
No water this time.
Lots of fire.
Which, in that same note, meaning we're evolving from the results of destruction to watching the ultimate mass destruction. Mm-hmm. So, in all the other movies where we've discussed and seen so far, now 1 through 4, bodies of water have represented almost like this safety blanket of destruction, where we have broken ships that land in the water. Mm-hmm. We have people realizing, like Taylor, realizing on the beach the destruction of humanity. It's almost as if this overflowing just emergence of emotion and the come down from the destruction. Right. But now, no water, only fire. Mm-hmm. Only fire. The polarizing chaos. Action of destruction and the actual chaos at hand that is occurring and unfolding right in front of us.
Right. Very
boom.
Well put.
I dropped the mic, but I don't want to break it. Koshik, don't kill me.
Please don't break my mic. Please don't break.
And I rated this one 9 out of 10 Caesar salads. I'm gonna keep that one.
Fuck yeah.
I'm gonna keep that one.
I fully agree.
9 out of 10, really?
I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5.
Epic.
Which is, I guess, a 9 out of 10 if you convert it to 10.
Yeah.
But I gave it that on Letterboxd in my rankings, which we will talk about next episode. at the end of the next episode, we'll talk about our rankings.
Okay.
And I wrote 4 out of 5 stars. These movies rip. What a batshit insane series of sequels that weirdly make perfect sense as you watch them, even though they seem like ridiculous escalation from the outside. Because from the outside, you look at the premises of these movies and you're like, what is going on? Right? And then when you watch them, they somehow perfectly lead into one another. And I think because there's this group of creatives, right? John Chambers is still doing the makeup. Den is still doing the scripts.
Which this is a large amount of his career too at this point.
I mean, it's been 5 years since the first one, and all these people are moving from one movie to the next. It's the same kind of like vision in a way, even though each one is so uniquely different. It's so standalone in a cool way. Yeah, like they work like the Mission Impossible movies being directed by different people each time. Sometimes the same person directs 2, but like you know what it is. And I think because of that, these movies they stand on their own in such fun ways, and they all represent such similar but different things in interesting ways that make them all fun to watch. Like you never get bored watching them because it's not like it's retreading the same ground. It's constantly pushing forward.
Context-wise, you're not retreading the same ground every time.
Thematically, sometimes
laying the foundation of the story in the beginning. Once you get past that and you allow them to cook and you allow them to
cook.
Yeah, exactly. It's not repetitive in a way that's overkill. It's repetitive in a way where it's like, oh, well, these characteristics from the last movie that maybe you didn't notice this time, now we're going to force feed it to you so you are primed and ready for the plot.
Yes, it's like evolved. Like it's carrying the things that they share similarly.
Yeah,
are the things that the whole franchise, it represents the themes of the franchise in a way. But each one still has its own approach and its own interests and its own hills that it decides to die on, and the ones that which I think is so cool. Yeah. And I think because there's a different director for each one of them except the last 2, you can feel that. And unfortunately, because there's the same director for the last 2, I feel like the positive quality of them having that level of change is a negative I feel about the next one, but we'll talk about that in the next movie because this is this movie and that's next episode.
Indeed.
Which is going to be the finale of our season 1 next episode.
Oh my goodness.
Are you excited?
I'm excited. Are you excited?
I'm excited. Are you excited?
I'm excited. Are you excited?
But yeah, this movie rips. I love this movie.
Yeah.
This movie is so cool. I think Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is definitely like what laid the groundwork for what the modern Apes movies were. Yeah. They're like adapting these last 2 movies in a way, in a trilogy, in a way that is like tonally like really modern and really sincere and also very like operatic, which is epic. And because of that, we have awesome movies. We got awesome movies because the movies in the past were awesome. Indeed. Isn't that awesome?
So awesome,
movies
Daniel.
Awesome, Winter?
Where are you going?
I don't know.
Where did your thought
movies
go?
Are awesome, and I love movies, and awesome movies come from awesome movies. Nice. I was so worried that like maybe these movies wouldn't be as interesting, but like they all hold their own.
Absolutely,
ground.
Yeah.
There's always a lot to talk about for each one, and I think that's cool. And
especially like we come from different places of watching these films too. Yeah. So I think having those polarizing conversations where you're seeing the different perspectives, it just adds to the context of the conversation.
Yeah, and it makes for an interesting conversation piece in a row when you're sitting in a room and just doing all of them back to back.
In the cold.
Marathoning.
Haven't seen the sun since this morning.
Hey, don't spoil the immersion. People aren't listening to this in the same way we're recording them. Well, if you want to find you, where can we find you, Winter?
Instagram at Cinematic Witchcraft.
That's Cinematic Witchcraft on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at DCR Films. That's where my funny film stuff goes. And if you like this podcast, leave a 5-star review on your podcatcher of choice and subscribe and hit the bell or hit like or add your favorites and tell a friend and give your mom a kiss and tell her good night. Because sometimes, listen, man, all she wants to know is that you care. Man, you're getting old and you leaving your family behind.
What is happening?
I don't know. I want to leave a good message for everybody.
They're going to start leaving hate comments.
Hate comments. Turn off all the comments. All right. And I guess with that's the end of this episode.
We will see you.
One episode left in this series.
In the finale.
The finale episode.
The finale episode.
Where Winter will finally drop the bomb on her theory of the next episode of this whole franchise.
Oh man, you're building up so high. What if it's disappointing?
And we're gonna give our theories about how these movies all connect. And Absolutely. We're gonna give our rankings of the movies. We're gonna rank them from favorite to least favorite, or favorite to from best to great. You know, like you know what I mean?
From yeah to okay.
Yeah. From yeah to yeah, you know. And as we say on every episode, we shall found our own armies, our own religion, our own dynasty. And that day is upon you now.